Our next speaker is someone who has packed more campaigning in the last 18 years than almost anyone I know. Atossa Soltani is the founder and executive director of Amazon Watch, a group that has done enormous benefit to both the peoples and the natural world of the Amazon basin. She has an incredible background. When I first met her, she was working for the city of Santa Monica in various environmental capacities. She went on to become a campaign director at the Rainforest Action Network, and then seeing a need in one bright moment in a protest with a bullhorn, she was asked by a member of the press, "Who do you represent?" And it came out of her mouth, Amazon Watch. And from that day forward, a new organization was born, one that we are incredibly grateful for. She's here today to give us the latest report on her work and to also introduce and speak with and translate for her incredible colleague, Patricia Gualinga, who I will also introduce afterwards. But please welcome we talk about the rights of Mother Earth. This woman has the force of Mother Earth in every step. Please welcome Atossa Soltani.
Good afternoon. Thanks for being here on this beautiful Sunday. Thank you, IFG, for having me here. It's an honor. And this powerful panel of amazing women, really hopeful. So I'm going to start with some slides running. The Amazon basin, first do a quick overview of the ecological importance of the Amazon. So the Amazon rainforest is the world's largest tropical rainforest, larger than the continental United States, covers 9 countries in South America, and while many people call the Amazon the lungs of the planet, many of the indigenous peoples I work with call the Amazon the heart of Mother Earth. And if you look at this vast rainforest, which is the size of the surface of the moon, you have 1/3 of all plant and animal species. About 20% of the world's fresh water flows through there. And when you just look at the amount of water that reaches the mouth of the Atlantic from the Amazon River, 209,000 cubic meters per second, and you add up the next 6 largest rivers of the world, you just barely get to the flow of the Amazon. And what's even more fantastic about this biome is that the water that reaches the Atlantic is only about 20%, 25% of all the rain that falls on the Amazon. The other 75% of the rain that falls on the Amazon is actually lifted up and evapotranspired through the trees, really feeding the global weather machine, feeding rainfall and driving weather around the world. And which is why it makes sense indigenous peoples call this the heart of the planet. It's the vascular system for our planet. So far, we have lost 20% of the Amazon in most of the last 100 years, and another 20% is vastly degraded. So we're reaching somewhere close to what scientists refer to as the tipping point, where the hydrological cycle begins to unravel, and we have a situation of savannaization compared with warmer temperatures, droughts, this positive, I should say negative feedback loop that allows the forest to dry back. And if you look at the predictions for business as usual, by the year 2030, we could lose over half of the Amazon unless we halt deforestation rates. So why Amazon Watch? It was in the mid-90s when we started to see all of these plans for a network of pipelines and roads and power lines crisscrossing the Amazon through indigenous territories, expansion of cattle ranching, expansion of soy frontiers, and all to convert this living forest, this biodiverse place, this engine of the global weather system, into commodities for global trade. That's why Amazon Watch was formed. So over the last 18 years, we've fought a lot of battles, many of them with indigenous peoples on the front lines. We've won many of them. We've kicked out oil companies. We've won lawsuits. There have been, some very proud moments, and we've changed laws, and most importantly, we've supported indigenous peoples in getting recognition to their ancestral territories and be able to get legal recognition for their ancestral territories. And some laws have been changed that make future destruction more difficult. Yet, more than ever, we're seeing a steady stream of short-sighted, egregious projects, infrastructure projects, many of them energy projects. And, sometimes I think about these large mega projects as zombies. You can try to kill them, but they come back to life over and over. And that's what it feels like sometimes. We fight a project, they just don't understand no, so they come back and they get resold to the people. At the root of this whole issue is, of course, what we've been hearing a lot at this conference about, what we know not talked about, our addiction to this energy, fossil fuel intensive model, our model of development, this whole notion that we have to convert living forests into commodities towards some kind of progress and have dominion over what began in the conquest as a dominion over the vacant lands. But beyond this, we need to even look further upstream and look at this whole worldview. And the whole global economic system, capitalism, is feeding this model and looking at our worldview, which is really brings me to what I see as the solutions, or part of the solutions. In fact, one of the problems is that we don't have good ecological literacy, understanding of the Earth's ecological system, of the role that the Amazon plays, for example, or what our oceans do for maintaining our balance or atmosphere. So we are lacking as a society ecological understanding of the planet. Furthermore, it's kind of like I read it somewhere. I can't remember where I read it, but it was this analogy that it was as if the brain thought it was the most important organ in the body and decided to mine the heart for some cash. And that's the analogy, and I think that's where we find ourselves with this, runaway, infinite growth model. And so when we think about the ecological U-turn, I think it's really about creating more ecological awareness about the systems of this planet and an ecological mind. We've had the compassionate mind. We've developed, many in Eastern philosophy, this idea of a compassionate mind. We need to develop the idea of the ecological mind. Now, indigenous peoples and lifeways and worldviews have many, many gifts, many teachings that our modern world desperately needs. And here's an important fact. If you look at the map of the world, the most biodiverse places on the planet are as defined by species per hectare, and the most culturally diverse places as defined by indigenous languages. When you superimpose those two maps, they're actually the same places. And so it's no wonder that you have something like 4% of the world's population, which are indigenous peoples, are the guardians of 80% of all biodiversity on the planet. So just to say it again, 80% of the world's biodiversity is on indigenous lands. And when we look at the devastation that's happening and the pursuit for resources and the next frontiers of these extreme oil and energy projects, that's why this is such a critical moment for this paradigm war. And I want to just say that science is backing this up. This is a map of the Xingu Basin in Brazil, and what you see is in Xingu Park, which is really actually a mosaic of all about indigenous territories, and one of the largest protected area complexes in the world. All around it, you see the red, which is deforestation. You have island of forest surrounded by sea of deforestation, and this is really indigenous peoples holding the frontier of deforestation. And so satellite imagery is saying over and over again that we are the most effective way of supporting forest conservation and biodiversity protection is by supporting indigenous peoples in the Amazon. And in the Amazon, a third of the Amazon is indigenous territories, either land that's already been titled or land that's being claimed. So really the battle's been about supporting indigenous guardians. And, of course, seeing indigenous people see themselves as part of nature. They see their relatives. They see their all living things as their relatives. And really being part of this web of life, being part of this strand of the web of life, and following the principles of reciprocity and being good ancestors. And these are the values that Indigenous peoples speak of, that we've heard so eloquently articulated by Vicky and Jeanette. I think that this is ultimately the crux of going upstream, not only challenging the development paradigm, but shifting worldviews, where we need to go. Last month, I had the honor of hearing Oren Lyons, Chief Oren Lyons, speak, who's a faith keeper of the Onondaga Nation. He spoke with urgency at the UN conference, World Conference on Indigenous Peoples. He basically spoke of the need for reconciliation between people and the natural world. He said, responsible and courageous actions must be taken to realign ourselves with the great laws of nature. We must meet this crisis now while we still have time. He reminded the heads of state that Indigenous peoples believe in the law of creation and that all life is bound by the same natural laws. He said, we call this the essence, the spirit of life, the powerful law of regeneration, the law of the seed. Now, he incidentally mentioned that that was exactly the same speech he made 14 years ago before the General Assembly, and not much had changed. But we are reaching a really urgent crisis. Earlier this month, the World Wildlife Fund issued a report that said that half of all wildlife populations have been lost in the last 40 years. In my lifetime, we've lost half of all animals on this planet. And we live in this perverse time where money is God, and we have basically put the value of money above life. And so really the question is, how can we redefine the true aspirations of our society? Is our true aspirations as a human species the accumulation of wealth and the pursuit of profit, or the pursuit of some kind of linear progress, which is basically taking us off the cliff of ecological collapse? Luckily, in this paradigm war, we have allies like Patricia, who I'm excited for you to hear, talking about the concept of buen vivir, a Quechua concept of a worldview that really says, living well redefines progress as the pursuit of well-being, harmony, and happiness. Now, I want to just tell you about a few of the battlegrounds in the Amazon. Two, namely, one is over large mega dams that are stopping the flow of free-flowing rivers of the Amazon, and the other is the oil frontier, the expanding oil frontier. Now, the Belo Monte Dam is the third largest dam in the world. It will destroy something like 100 kilometers of the Xingu River. It's been a battle that's been going on for 30 years. I'm very sad to tell you here today that the flow of the Xingu River has been blocked. This is the 7-kilometer-long dam, bigger than the Bay Bridge. For those of you who know the Bay Bridge, I don't know my New York bridges, but this is an area that contains 500 species of fish, and it's one of 4 dams planned on this river, and then there's 29 dams planned on the Tapajos River, which is the last free-flowing tributary in the Amazon, the Tapajos. And we are now battling both of these fronts. I'm been involved for the last 7 or 8 years in this battle, and while we have not stopped the dam, we have cost the company $1 billion and a year delay. Now, when you look at the importance of the flowing rivers of the Amazon for everything that we talked about, you can see why this is a technology gone wrong. And the work is really about building a movement of communities affected by dams to stop these future dams and really change Brazil's energy model. And here you can see a map of all of the proposed dams that are planned, large dams that are planned over the next 20 years, because Brazil is planning on doubling its electricity production. And this is what it sees as its pathway forward. And this is what we're challenging, to draw the other map that shows decentralized, distributed, efficient energy production that meets the needs of the people, not the needs of the mining companies, which is what is supported by these mega dams. and been part of many actions in Rio and on the dam itself. There's been 19 lawsuits, about 10 different occupations that have lasted as long as a month of the dam site, and it's definitely a growing movement. Next, I want to focus on a region of the Amazon that's actually the headwaters of the Amazon River. It's the area of the Napo Marañón. What I'm showing here is a map of biodiversity in the Americas. And when you look at the peak diversity for all 4 groups of plants, birds, mammals, and amphibians, what you see is that the area in red is the area that contains some of the highest recorded biodiversity. Now, science is still trying to catch up with all of the species to be discovered ahead of the wave of destruction. But where we want to take a quicker look at this area, this is an area between Ecuador and Peru. It's the land between the Napo River Basin and the Marañón River Basin, and really starts in the glaciers high up in the Andes. The area outlined in green is the Yasuní National Park. What you have is an area that is quite large, maybe a third of the size of California, and it's incredibly biodiverse. It's also an area where if you were to look at the land that's already titled and land that's in the process of being claimed by indigenous peoples, something like 60-70% of this area would be indigenous territories, and most of the rest could be or is in the process or is already a protected area of some kind. So you have a huge potential for protecting and defending the largest, biodiversity region of the world, and one of the most significant areas. Unfortunately, this is the vision for this area. This is the same basin. You have existing oil production and new production. The stars are the new production, and you have an incredible new number of new oil blocks that are basically being auctioned in gray. And if you look at the western Amazon, further south, this is Ecuador, all of Peru, western Brazil. This is what Winona was talking about, drilling at the ends of the earth, going to remote areas, roadless areas of the forest to get the last few drops of oil. Now, the battle in Yasuní is where the battle to keep the oil in the ground has begun. And this is where the Ecuadorian president committed to keep the oil in the ground in 2008 and basically did not follow his commitment. He lost, maybe his intention was never there, but he basically sold this area, the public, this idea of keeping the oil on the ground, and then reneged and made a deal with the Chinese to give them preferential rights to drill here. Now, Yasuní is a Pleistocene refuge. It was here during the last ice age, and it's likely to survive climate change. The people of Ecuador rose up. They demanded that this project be canceled, and 800,000 signatures were gathered for a national referendum to put this to the vote of the entire public. Something like 90% of Ecuadorians supported keeping the oil in the ground, and it was a huge battle this summer. Unfortunately, through some draconian measures, the so-called progressive president quashed the referendum, invalidated half of the signatures, and while they got, something like 7% of the electorate to actually sign the referendum petition, they were not able to have a referendum. But nonetheless, the public is very clear in wanting to keep the oil in the ground. Supported by them are all of the many, many indigenous peoples who are also fighting their own battles. And so this is one of the capped wells from this area that I happened on in the forest. So basically, just to conclude, 50%, the International Energy Agency came out and said 50% of all known oil reserves and 80% of all the coal reserves need to stay in the ground if we are to keep our climate from safely below 2 degrees. And basically, the idea of keeping the oil on the ground failed in Yasuní, but it's just beginning. There's a global call to keep the oil on the ground, and what we've seen is this is a movement led by women and young people, and that we ultimately want to see a linking of global movements from the tar sands, from the Arctic, from the fracking in Dakotas, all over, deep shore, offshore drilling, and off the coast of New Zealand. These are all related battles. And if there was anywhere to say that we need to cut the tentacles of the expansion of the oil frontier, it's in these places, and in places where Indigenous peoples are standing up and resisting. So the campaign to keep the oil in the ground, I'm going to leave you with a 3-minute video. It's the campaign calling for a global petition, and I invite you to sign it and share it, and basically link up the communities. We do need to, in conclusion, I would say we do need to tax carbon. We need the divestment investment campaign, but ultimately we also need to unite the frontline battles to keep oil in the ground. And that's, let's do it. This is where we start. This is where we go. COP20s in Lima in December, then Paris. We need to see a global movement linking all of these communities. And thank you very much. Let's do this.
Life on Earth would not be possible without the oxygen and fresh water generated in places like the Amazon rainforest. But the Amazon is being destroyed by the oil industry for short-term economic gain, threatening the existence of the plants, animals, and people who live in the rainforest.
Ecuador is not going to get out of poverty just because they come and drill for oil in the Amazon. Ecuador is going to lose the only rainforest that we have left. It's going to destroy cultures, the environment, kill animals. That's not getting out of poverty.
The people who live in the Amazon rainforest are doing everything they can to stop the expansion of the oil frontier, but local governments are supporting the oil companies, under the false impression that drilling for oil will get them out of poverty.
If you look at those places where they are drilling oil, those are the regions most people living with terrible health conditions and no education. Those are the regions that are most poor. Thought that they could come here and exploit oil and then just wash their hands and they would move on. But that did not happen. We're a pain in the ass for the government right now. And that makes me hopeful. That makes me know that we can get further. You cannot justify human rights abuses with economical arguments. We are also human beings just as anyone else, and we have the same rights as anyone else to choose our way of life and to have that choice respected.
This is not just a local issue. This is a global issue. If oil companies are allowed to destroy the Amazon, it would permanently change the climate in both South America and North America. This will have devastating consequences for the entire world.
The cycle of the weather has changed here. When it should rain, it doesn't rain, and when it shouldn't rain, it rains. There's a whole system in the forest. It's not just, there are animals living there. It's a whole world, how they interact, how they live, what they eat, where they move. I remember my grandfather saying once that it is from the Amazon that the breath of the world comes, because without the Amazon, the world would not breathe.
The International Energy Agency has said that if we want to keep global temperatures from increasing, at least half of the world's oil and coal supply should stay in the ground. If something isn't done soon, the world's temperature could permanently increase by 8 degrees, a critical level at which the global ecosystem would move towards an unstoppable collapse. But it's not too late to change this. Citizens from all over the world must come together and urge political leaders to keep the oil in the ground. Go to AmazonWatch.org to learn how you can help protect the Amazon rainforest, and share this video with anyone you know who likes to breathe fresh air. Together we can let our voices be heard and keep our world beautiful.